I thought I would start my video off camera because I don't want you guys to give me the virus. So funny. I'm selling these special bandanas for $99. They block 1% of all particulate matter. I'm joking. The fact that I even have to say I'm joking. In a day and age where people will sell you anything. Anyway, how's it going, everybody? I'd like to talk today about this virus that we keep hearing about. Now, I should give you a little bit of a backstory. I was a prepper, if you will, at one time where I was kind of obsessed with making sure I had enough dried food, water, emergency supplies, all these things. That was about 10, 12 years ago. But that mentality never goes away. So for me, being prepared just means having basic supplies, basic amenities, the things that I use in my daily life. And to be perfectly honest, with all the people freaking out and going out and buying toilet paper and water, I've always said, hey, in an emergency situation, I'll use a rag and I can drink tap water if I need to. In other words, the most important thing is that we have food and calories, right? So let me back up a little bit. I talked about this in a couple different videos, and I was going to save it for tomorrow's Sunday, podcast ramble. But I live in Washington State, okay? This morning I remember seeing this article. It's like visiting the epicenter of the outbreak. And it's in the U.S., and it's in Washington, and I live in Washington. Go figure, right? So this morning we had our first case in Clark County, which is where I live, which is right next to Portland. And Portland's already had its cases, so it's not like a big surprise. And in fact, if this virus has probably been here for several weeks, they say. But in my own state, there are 102 cases last time I checked, and by the time this video is uploaded, I'm sure there will be several more recorded. But that's 102 cases that have been proven. We have been short on supplies. We know all the details on that. But 12 people have died in my state. And a lot of folks instantly will compare that to the flu. I say the flu kills millions of people every year, and it absolutely does. And a lot of people have compared this virus to the flu. But I would say this: have people shut down entire cities because of the flu and walk through the streets spraying sanitizer everywhere? Airports shut down businesses, schools because of the flu? No, of course not. And there's a lot of folks who would say don't panic, and I agree. Don't panic. There's no need to panic because it's not going to do you any good. But you can't ignore the fact that the virus is here in the United States, and it is going to cause a massive wave of repercussions, especially in the economy, but also in people's lives. Now, for those who compare it to the flu, you should know the statistics. From what I recall, I believe it's 0.01% die from the flu who catch it, and 0.3%, around 0.3%, or rather 30 times more can die from this virus. Now, we've all seen the videos of people dying in the streets of Wuhan, and who knows what's real and what's not. And we live in an age where nobody trusts anybody, and I'll get to that aspect of this. But the incubation period on this virus could be a couple weeks. It could be a week. It could be a few days. It could be a day, according to the doctor who supposedly got it from one patient. Or maybe he got it a week before. Nobody really knows, and that's what makes it confusing. And so keeping a level head about this is really important. Now, I live in the epicenter, like I said. In King County, north of here, I believe they've already closed the schools. And so those who are saying, oh, it's no big deal, it'll pass. It will pass. Everything passes in time. The 1918 pandemic killed 5% of the world's population. Okay? It's 1 in 20 people. Overall, worldwide. And after I read this, and this isn't related to this, and I'm not causing fear, I was just fascinated. Apparently, the 1918 flu pandemic, and this is not a flu, the coronavirus is not a flu virus, but that one killed, it came in 3 waves of about 6 months each. And from what I understand, the second wave killed every person who got it. That blew my mind. I was like, well, okay, so what does that mean for the coronavirus, which is only a few months in? Does that mean that we're in the first wave of 6 months and then the second wave could be more dangerous? Who knows? We just don't know. But knowing that we're 2 to 3 weeks behind knowing what's going on because of the incubation period is kind of a creepy thing. And my kids go to school in Clark County, where there's been a case, and our schools notified us this morning that they might, that they're waiting to hear to see if they're going to close. What do you do when you're a kid? And, you stick your hands in your mouth, you play with your friends in the lunchroom, you grab the bars. I mean, it's like you can't avoid it when you're a kid. And some of the reports say that children actually get it very mildly compared to adults, and especially the elderly, and compromised immune systems and all the usual things we hear. That's kind of a scary proposition when you consider how many kids could be carrying it. And I'm not trying to cause fear. I need to keep repeating that. I'm just giving you information because I'm really trying to avoid the controversy and the propaganda and the bullshit surrounding this. I'm biting my tongue not to say anything about the chief, the leader of the country, who is downplaying it because it's an election year, and because I hope I'm wrong, and I really hope that it's not a big deal. But there are some very severe methods being implemented abroad to stop this. I mean, when you're stopping cruise ships full of relatively wealthy passengers, I would say a person who can afford to go on a cruise is a person who can probably afford to file a lawsuit, or, in other words, the fact that they've stopped so many cruise ships and that there's been such an issue shows that, people are very nervous about this. And in other countries, they've been able to quarantine cities because of their communism, the way that they operate. The government can do anything they want, which we in the West abhor. We hate that. We refuse to be told what to do. And this is one of the scariest things, because I'm afraid that Americans will have no interest in not just self-quarantining or admitting they have the virus or whatever, but limiting travel, all these things. But a person is much more stubborn. Americans have this kind of resilience to us, and I think it's kind of our strength and our weakness in a sense, that sometimes we can't step back and say, okay, maybe we need to listen to the experts. And this is a difficult thing because we live in a day where we have no trust in media because everything is fake news. We have no trust in the government. And I would like to say there's two angles to that. There are people who completely trust the government. In other words, there are people who literally follow Trump's tweets and think that that's what's going on in the world. And then there are people who distrust all of government, and then people who trust some of government. But the point is, overall, it seems like we have no trust in media, no trust in government, and the worst of all, no trust in each other. We are at such odds with one another because of all the bullshit propaganda right now that people, it seems like, would just go out in spite of others, and spread the virus. There are still people going on cruises, going to Disneyland, all these other trips, and that's fine. People have to live their lives. I get that. I understand. But at least be honest enough with yourself to realize that other people may be endangered by it. And this is all, that's only the health side of it. That side of it is pretty small. People die every year. A lot of people die every year. And I think the bigger issue that a lot of people are, one of the most interesting aspects of this is how bad the stock market is crashing. And this is why it's become a political issue. Trump is afraid of looking bad when he wants to make it look like the economy is doing great, which maybe it is. I'm not arguing that, and I'm not making this political. I watched his speech the other day along with the CDC officials and the people in charge. He was basically disputing everything they said and saying, oh, the cases are on the decline and we have medicine on the way and you guys are all going to be, it'll make you all feel better and you'll be fine soon. Instead of saying, be vigilant, simple things, wash your hands, cover your cough. I mean, people do look to leaders. I'm glad I don't, because I don't trust anybody in charge, because I know that their main interest is the bottom line, not the people, it's cash. The stock market is crashing hard right now. It's finally dropped below what it was in 2008. The Fed dropped their interest rate a few days ago to try to ease that. The most they've dropped it in, what? Yeah, the most they've dropped it in 12 years since 2008, 0.5% or something. It eased it for like a half a day. And let me say, before I go any further, I don't give a shit about the stock market. As far as I'm concerned, let it fall apart. And I want to explain why. And I kind of revel in the idea of the stock market crashing for one reason. Stocks are bullshit. There was a time, let's just go back to the Depression. I was talking with my son about this earlier. Back in the Depression, a lot of Americans owned stocks. So when everything went under, the average American might have lost some money. But I'm going to ask you as an individual, how many people do you personally know that actually own stock? And out of those people, how much money do they have, the average person? If you have enough money to invest and speculate in stock, you're taking that risk, right? Well, it's more than that. It's that all of the stocks now are consolidated in the 1% or the 0.01%. So a majority of the wealth is held by them. So when the stocks fail, it's the billionaires that lose the money, not the average American. And people will say, well, that trickles down because it goes down the economy, and then the employers lose their money, and then they can't pay their employees. No, bullshit. We have a minimum wage for a reason, you know. If you want to say people are going to lay off their employees, that's only going to happen if there's less of a demand for the product. If employees are needed, they're needed. If they're not, they're not. The idea that protecting stocks is protecting the average American, I think is complete bullshit. I really do. And I'm not just speaking out my ass, you know. I've got books where I've read that explain to me enough about the economy to know that we're not doing any better than we were before. And this is a wake-up call for Americans, I hope. So I think this virus will come, it will go, and in the end, if it wipes out a bunch of stocks, most Americans will realize what really matters, which is food, shelter, you know. You'll get to the point where you realize how much worse could it get, what really matters in this world. All the government cares about is money. Most of the people in politics, not all of them, there are some really good people who want to make change. But by the time you get to the top, it's really hard not to care about money. And there are a few politicians who stand out as being great people. I highly respect Bernie Sanders. I've said that before, and I'll continue to support him. Not because I think every one of his solutions are great, or because I'm some sort of a communist, but because I believe in community. Of course, communism, community. But I also believe in equality, at least fair options for each person, and basic health care, because otherwise, what's the point in having a nation? But in the meantime, the only reason I bring that up is because a guy like Bernie, I know, wouldn't fuck over the American people. He would be straight. He would tell you what's going on. He wouldn't say something just to get a political win. And this has been proven over and over. And that's the problem with politics right now, is that we have no honesty. And so it's a wake-up call for self-sufficiency. Learn to garden. Learn to fix things. Learn to build things. And that reminds me of something that somebody brought up the other day. I don't recall if it was my mom, but she was talking about this I think it was my mom, we were talking about this, and she was talking about insults and how the older generation, the baby boomers, are considering this certain term an insult. And I said, oh, you mean okay boomer? She's like, no, it's actually learn to code. There are old people out there, if you're one of them, who actually is offended by young people saying learn to code. And I have a point to this. I'm sure there's a lot of people who don't even know what that means. Well, basically, when young folks say to old people, learn to code, what they're saying is learn how to work with computers, because otherwise you're going to get left behind. And that's their response to people losing their jobs in factories and elsewhere. And I think it's a bullshit response. Because when you're losing your job, you know, having young people tell you, oh, learn to code, that's some arrogant, pretentious bullshit. What they should be saying, and what Gen X is saying to all these youngsters that are saying learn to code, is learn to garden. Learn to build. Learn to fix your own house. All people should know how to fix basic things. how to repair things, how electricity works. These things are things that could actually benefit you in a major disaster. If you have a generator, and you have enough gasoline, and you have a light, even in a dark winter, you can still grow food. Most people aren't even aware of the fact that, there are so many things that we can learn about gardening, and I say gardening because that's really what matters. Food, right? We've become such a consumer society. I mean, I am personally sickened by Gucci and Prada and the way that people shake their fucking labels around. I think it's garbage. I think if you're really the kind of person, let me put it this way. If you're the kind of person who goes out and buys a Coach purse so you can look good, and you don't buy a knockoff Coach purse, then you're an idiot for doing so. And I say that because if you're buying it just for looks, why not just buy a knockoff? Now, if you're buying it for an investment, that's a different story. I've seen purses that go for $500,000 that people resell. So be it. Maybe I'm being a little bit of a jerk, but I really get tired of consumer society that complains about the way things are going when they're willing to spend $500 on a pair of jeans or $1,000 on a purse. This is garbage. These are things we don't need. And these are the things that are going to be affected by this virus. The things that people are going to wake up to realize, oh, there's shortages over here, there's shortages over there. And I'm hoping that the consumers suffer first. I'm not talking about the consumers of food and basic needs. I'm talking about the consumers of these goods that come from China, that a lot of them come from Wuhan, that are manufactured elsewhere, that we just think that just come off the shelf and, oh, maybe they're made in America, or maybe there aren't, isn't child labor making this shit. And I'm sorry to turn this from a virus video into a video about basic bullshit child labor and, regulations that allow it. But the wealthy consumers are the ones who cause these problems. I've seen enough investigative journalism into how a lot of these supposed, Italian-made purses or wallets or whatnot are made. And I'm not saying there aren't good quality products out there. If you can start a company where you can sell a wallet for $1,000 that you made in a couple days, props to you. Or a couple hours, sorry. But each person has to have their own unique, every country has their own way of doing things. I totally understand that. To get back to the main point here, the value of commodities is really about what do you need, the basics. And I'm hoping this wakes people up to why none of that shit matters. The commodities will always increase with demand. So the farmers, whoever they are, wherever they are, if the shit really hits the fan, and let's say there's a world catastrophe where nobody can function anymore the way they used to. Let's say a lot of the digital farmers might be out of business. Maybe they can't run their tractors anymore because they're all working on GPS. I mean, everything is connected to the internet. If you are an individual who can be self-sufficient, learn to harvest your own food, at least some basic foods, and I'm guilty. I don't harvest all my food. Hell no. But I would like to in the future, if I ever needed to, at least have the skills to grow food. I don't know. I don't really invest in the stock market. I don't invest in society and its bullshit. I really don't like the way that things operate. And I tend to kind of take things pretty easy because the world is the way it is. I accept it for what it is. I'm not going to sit here in front of the camera and complain every day about capitalism because it'll eat itself like every other thing does. Everything falls apart in time. That's just life. So that's about all I got to say. Thanks for listening. I want to leave on a good note. The virus isn't going to kill everybody and the world isn't going to completely collapse. But each individual has to stop relying on their governments, on their companies to supply them with everything they need. We really have to try to be self-sufficient, learn how to fix things. If you can't repair a basic broken water pipe in an emergency, or you can't fix a hole in your roof, these are things that everybody should know. Not a man, but every man, woman, and child should learn. And we've become pretty passive, I think, over time. And I'm talking about Americans, damn it. You Americans! And I'm one of you. So, anyway, here I am sitting at the epicenter of the outbreak in Washington State. Everything's just starting to fall apart, and maybe it'll just all recover. Or maybe in the next few weeks, everything will just fall into pieces. We'll see. Peace out.